The first time my daughter-in-law screamed at me, it wasn't the words that hurt. It was the way my son kept eating his dinner, eyes down, like the clatter of his fork against the plate mattered more than my dignity. I remember the hum of the refrigerator, the smell of burned onions, and how suddenly small I felt in a house I had owned longer than she had been alive. I am 67 years old now, old enough to know that life rarely announces its turning points with drama. Most of the time, it arrives quietly, disguised as routine. Back then, my days were measured in utility bills and pill organizers, in grocery receipts folded into my purse, in mornings that started with the radio and ended with pain de total. My husband, Harold, had been gone for 8 years. A heart attack, quick and unfair. We had paid off this house together, signing the final mortgage release at a wooden desk in a downtown bank, the clerk stamping the paper with a dull thud that felt like freedom. After Harold died, the house echoed too much. When my son Daniel said he and his wife Rebecca were struggling with rent, I didn't hesitate. Family is supposed to lean on each other. That's what I believed. I told them they could move in for a while. I even said it with a smile, standing in the doorway with my cardigan buttoned wrong. At first, Rebecca thanked me. She hugged me stiffly, like someone checking a box. Daniel promised it would only be temporary. We didn't put anything in writing. I told myself trust was enough. I had raised my son to be kind. I had clipped coupons, worked double shifts at the library, and skipped vacations so he could go to college. Those sacrifices felt like deposits in a moral bank. Slowly, the air in the house changed. Rebecca rearranged the kitchen without asking. She criticized how I folded towels, how I seasoned soup, how I spent money. She once waved an electricity bill at me, her nails tapping the total like a gavel, telling me I was wasting power, because I liked the lights on in the evening. Daniel would sigh, tired from work, and ask me to keep the peace. I learned to swallow my responses. I told myself it was easier that way. I paid the property taxes when the notice came in the mail, my name printed clearly at the top. I covered the water bill when Rebecca forgot. I kept every receipt, sliding them into an old manila envelope, out of habit more than suspicion. Years of widowhood teach you to be careful. The yelling became normal, like weather. Rebecca's voice could fill a room, sharp and confident, telling me I was old-fashioned, that this wasn't really my house anymore because we all live here. The night she told me to stay out of grown folks' conversations. Daniel didn't look up. His silence felt louder than her shouting. That was when something inside me shifted, not anger, exactly, clarity. I stood in my bedroom later, listening to the house settle, the familiar creaks in the floorboards that had always comforted me. I opened my filing cabinet and ran my fingers over the folder labeled with my last name, the same one I had carried since I was a young bride. Inside was the deed, crisp and unquestioned, stamped and signed, a quiet truth waiting patiently. I didn't know yet what I would do. I only knew that the woman I was becoming would not disappear politely. The next morning, I found my favorite mug in the trash, cracked clean down the side like someone had done it on purpose and then dared me to notice. I stood there with my hand on the lid, listening to Rebecca laugh in the living room, and I realized grief can come back wearing new clothes. Not for Harold this time, for myself. I rinsed the coffee pot anyway. That's what women like me do when the world tilts. We tidy so we don't fall. The kitchen smelled of lemon cleaner and something sweet Rebecca liked to burn in a candle, a vanilla scent that tried too hard to feel like home. My home had always smelled like dish soap and pepper and warm bread on Sundays. Now it smelled like someone else's decision. Daniel left early, kissing my cheek like a habit he hadn't examined in years. "Try to have a good day, Mom," he said, eyes already on his phone. Rebecca didn't say goodbye. She never did anymore. She'd started treating me like a piece of furniture, useful when you set something on it, invisible when you don't. I spent that day the way I usually did, laundry humming, daylight slipping across the floor, the mail arriving like a small verdict. There was a notice from the county about the property tax installment, and my name sat there in black ink, steady and official. I paid it online, the way Harold had taught me before he died, checking the secure payment screen twice, saving the confirmation number, printing the receipt because old habits are sometimes the only guardians you have. The printer whirred and spat out the page, and I slid it into my manila envelope. Rebecca came into the kitchen while I was folding it. Her eyes flicked to the paper. "What's that?" she asked, like she had a right to inventory my hands. "Just a receipt," I said softly. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "You know, Daniel and I could take over some of this stuff. It's a lot for you." It sounded kind if you didn't know how to listen. But I did. I heard the hidden message. "You're in the way." "I've managed my whole life," I replied. My voice surprised me, calm, but not apologetic. Rebecca's smile tightened. "Yeah, different times." That evening, she hosted dinner like she was auditioning for a role. She'd made chicken with rosemary, a recipe she once bragged she learned from a food blogger. She set the table with cloth napkins we didn't own before and kept calling it our house in conversation, letting the words hang in the air like a flag she wanted everyone to salute. Daniel ate fast, exhausted. He had shadows under his eyes. His work had been cutting hours. Or that's what he said. I had offered help once, quietly sliding him an envelope with cash from my small savings. He accepted it without meeting my gaze, like shame could be swallowed if you didn't taste it. After dinner, Rebecca asked me, no, told me, to stop leaving my old paperwork in the office nook because she wanted to set up a desk for herself. I stared at her, the way her hair was pulled back too tight, the way her earrings swung like punctuation. "That paperwork is important," I said. She waved her hand. "It's just clutter. Daniel said you keep every little thing like it's a museum." Daniel's fork paused. For a second, I thought he might speak, but then he said, "Mom, maybe you could keep it in your room. We need the space." Space. That word, as if my life could be folded smaller to make theirs feel bigger. I carried my envelope upstairs that night and sat on my bed, the lamp throwing a soft circle of light. I opened the folder with the deed again, not because I doubted it, but because I needed to see something in my life that was unambiguous. The paper felt cool and crisp, the county seal embossed like a promise. Harold's signature and mine sat there together, a pair of names that had built a whole world. Downstairs, I heard Rebecca's voice rise, not at Daniel this time, but into the phone. "No, we're basically running the place," she said, laughing. "His mom lives here, but it's fine. She's, she just needs to be told." My chest tightened, not because I was shocked, because I wasn't. A few days later, a small twist arrived in the form of a man at the door. He wore a polo shirt with a logo stitched on it and held a clipboard. "Hi, ma'am," he said kindly. "I'm here about the security system install." I blinked. "The what?" He glanced down. "Order says new cameras, doorbell unit, interior sensors. It's under Daniel." "I didn't order anything," I said, my voice steady but cold. From the hallway, Rebecca appeared too fast. "Oh, yes, that's for us," she chirped. "We've been meaning to upgrade. It's safer." The installer looked between us, uncertain. I could smell the faint plastic scent of new equipment in his box. "What areas are you installing?" I asked him. Rebecca answered before he could. "Living room, kitchen, front door, back door, basic." Basic. Like surveillance was a throw pillow. I turned to her. "Inside the house?" She gave me a look like I was slow. "It's not a big deal," Everyone has cameras. I thought of myself in my robe in the morning, shuffling to make tea, scratching at my arm because dry skin comes with age. I thought of privacy, the last quiet thing a widow owns. My stomach turned. I'm not comfortable with that, I said. Rebecca's voice sharpened. It's not just about you. Daniel came home in the middle of it, work badge still clipped to his belt. He looked tired, then irritated, like my discomfort was another chore. Mom, why are you making this hard? I stared at him. My son. The boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms and ask me if lightning could break a house in half. He was looking at me like I was the storm. This is my home, I said quietly. And I'm not being recorded in it. Rebecca scoffed. We live here too. The installer cleared his throat. Ma'am, I can't install anything if the homeowner objects, liability and all. Homeowner. The word landed on the kitchen tile with a satisfying weight. Rebecca's eyes flashed. Excuse me? The man shifted uncomfortably. I'm just saying it's policy. If you're not on the deed or you don't have written authorization. Rebecca's cheeks went pink. Daniel's expression flickered, a quick panic he tried to hide. He opened his mouth, then shut it. I said nothing else. I didn't need to. I watched Rebecca force a smile and tell the installer they'd reschedule, her voice tight as a pulled thread. When the door closed, she spun toward Daniel, hissing his name like blame. He rubbed his face and looked at the floor, trapped between the woman he chose and the mother he forgot how to honor. That night, I lay awake listening to their muffled argument through the wall. Words like control, money, and future slid under my door like smoke. I didn't cry. I felt something steadier than tears. In the morning, I made oatmeal the way Harold liked it, even though Harold wasn't here to eat it. I put on my coat and drove to the bank where we used to sign things. The parking lot looked the same tired shrubs and the same automatic doors. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of paper and polished counters. At the desk, a young woman with a neat bun smiled. How can I help you today? I took out my folder, my manila envelope, and the printed receipt with the confirmation number. My hands didn't shake. I need to understand exactly what's in my name, I said, and how to protect it. She nodded, professional. We can review your accounts and discuss options. Are you looking for a will update? A trust? Something else? I looked down at my own signature on the deed, then back up at her. Outside, the winter light hit the glass doors like something clean and honest. I'm looking for peace, I said, and I think it starts with paperwork. The banker didn't call me sweetie, and I was grateful for that. She called me Mrs. Whitaker, like my life still carried weight in a room full of numbers. Her name tag said Megan, and she spoke gently while her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up accounts I had opened back when phones were still attached to walls. I watched my balances appear on the screen, little rows of history, the quiet proof of decades of careful choices. Harold and I were never rich, but we were steady. We paid what we owed, kept what we earned, and saved because the world can change in a single ambulance ride. Megan turned the monitor slightly so I could see. These are your current accounts, she said. Checking, savings, and the home insurance escrow you set up years ago. Everything looks normal. Normal? I almost laughed. My home didn't feel normal anymore. Then she hesitated, just a breath. There is one recent inquiry, she added, and the tone of her voice changed into something more official. Someone asked about adding an authorized user to your credit card. My throat tightened. When? 2 weeks ago, she said, clicking into the details. It was flagged because the request came over the phone and didn't match your usual pattern. The call was made from a number listed under your household address. The air in the bank felt suddenly too cold, My hands went still in my lap. Who was the authorized user supposed to be? Megan glanced at me, careful. A Rebecca Lawson, my daughter-in-law. She hadn't even bothered to use Daniel's last name. She wanted her own key to my spending, my credit, my life. I took a slow breath and felt my spine straighten, one quiet vertebra at a time. Was it approved? No, Megan said. The agent noted that you didn't answer the security questions, so it was denied, but I wanted to make sure you knew it happened. I stared at the screen as if it might change into something kinder. A request, a denial, a note, all of it typed in clean little boxes, like betrayal can be filed and time-stamped. Have you ever felt something like this? Realizing the person smiling at your table might be counting what you have? Did you ever realize too late that you were being used, not loudly at first, but carefully, like someone testing a door handle to see if it's unlocked? Megan printed the inquiry record for me. The paper slid out warm from the machine. I held it between my fingers, like evidence from a crime scene, except the crime was trust. I'd like to add extra security, I said. A note that no one can make changes unless I'm here in person. And I want alerts for every transaction. Of course, Megan replied, and I saw something like respect in her eyes. We can also change your account passwords, add a verbal passphrase, and restrict phone access. A verbal passphrase. I thought of Rebecca's voice, the way she liked to sound confident. I chose words she would never guess, words from my past. Megan typed them in, and the click of her keyboard sounded like a lock turning. When I left the bank, the sun was lower, pale winter light stretching across the pavement. I sat in my car for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel, the printed inquiry in my purse like a small stone pulling everything downward. Then I drove somewhere I hadn't planned to go, a law office on Maple Street, tucked between a dental clinic and a quiet insurance agency. I'd passed it 100 times and never needed it. The sign was simple: Henderson and Price, attorneys at law. The waiting room smelled like paper and peppermint. A little dish of hard candies sat on the reception desk, the kind old people appreciate because we've learned small comforts matter. A man in his late 50s came out to greet me, silver hair combed neatly, glasses that made him look like he saw too much. "Mrs. Whitaker?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes." "I'm Thomas Henderson," he said, offering his hand. His grip was firm but not showy. "Come on back." His office was tidy, framed certificates on the wall, a small lamp casting warm light over stacks of files. When he asked what brought me in, my voice almost failed. Not from weakness, but from the strange shame that comes with admitting your own child has let you be diminished. So I started with Harold. I told him about the heart attack, the quiet after, the way I kept the house because it was the last place I still felt like myself. I told him how Daniel and Rebecca moved in for a while, how the yelling started, how my son looked away, how an installer had said the word homeowner out loud, and my whole body had remembered it. Then I placed Megan's printed inquiry on his desk. Mr. Henderson read it without expression. When he finished, he folded his hands and looked at me as if I were not dramatic, not foolish, not overreacting, just a woman with facts. "This is important," he said. "Trying to add someone as an authorized user without your consent is a red flag. Not a crime in itself if it was only an inquiry, but it tells us intent." I nodded slowly. "I don't want to hurt them," I said, and I hated how my voice still tried to protect Daniel. "You can protect yourself without harming anyone," he replied. "But you need boundaries with teeth." Teeth. That word made me think of Rebecca's smile. He asked practical questions. Who paid which bills? Whether there was any written agreement. Whether I had ever signed anything recently. I told him about the property tax receipts, the utilities I covered, the manila envelope where I kept confirmations and statements. I told him Rebecca wanted my old paperwork out of sight. I told him about the camera plan. Mr. Henderson nodded and took notes, the pen scratching softly across the page. "We should check the county recorder's office," he said. "Make sure there's been no fraudulent filing related to your property. It's rare, but it happens. We can also place a title alert if your county offers it, and I recommend you keep your deed and identification secured." A small chill ran down my arms. "You think she'd try to take the house?" "I think she's already trying to take pieces of your life," he said carefully. "And houses are just paperwork to people who don't respect meaning." He explained options in plain language. Updating my will, creating a living trust, naming a trusted person for medical decisions who was not influenced by anyone living in my home, locking down financial access, formalizing any living arrangement because even family can become complicated under the law when time passes and expectations harden. He paused, then asked gently, "Do they receive mail at your address?" "Yes," I said. "Both of them." "Then we'll need to be mindful," he replied. "Depending on your state, long-term residents can create tenant rights, even in your own home. You can still take legal steps, but it must be done correctly. Notices, documentation, timelines. Tenant rights. My home suddenly felt like it could be argued over by strangers in a courtroom. I swallowed. I never thought I'd need a lawyer against my own son. Mr. Henderson leaned forward slightly. "You're not going against him," he said. "You're standing for yourself." When I walked out of his office, the sky had turned the color of worn denim. My breath fogged in the cold. I sat in my car again, looking at the steering wheel as if it could tell me how motherhood ends when your child grows up and forgets you're human. I didn't go straight home. I drove to a small office supply store and bought a lockbox, the kind with a key and a combination. The cashier asked if it was for important papers, and I said yes, because that was true. But it wasn't just papers. It was my name, my choices, my right to sleep without feeling watched. That night, when I carried the lockbox upstairs, Rebecca's eyes followed it like she could sense the weight of it. "What's that?" she asked from the couch, her voice too casual. "Just something for my documents," I said. She laughed lightly. "Documents. You're so paranoid lately." Daniel looked up, confused. "Mom, what's going on?" I met my son's eyes and held them. My heart hurt in a quiet, deep way, but my voice stayed calm. "Something changed," I said, "and I'm paying attention now." Rebecca's smile slipped for half a second, like a mask tugged by a sudden wind. Then she recovered, smoothing her face and reaching for the TV remote. Upstairs, I locked the deed away. The click was small, but it sounded like the beginning of my life returning to me. The house felt different after that, like it knew secrets were being stored in new places. Floors creaked more loudly at night, or maybe I was just listening harder. I started noticing details I had ignored for years. The way Rebecca lowered her voice when I entered a room, the way Daniel's questions came wrapped in concern that felt rehearsed. The first envelope arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slid halfway into the mailbox, like it was unsure it belonged to me. It was from a credit monitoring service I didn't remember signing up for. My name was spelled correctly, my address printed neatly. Inside, it said my enrollment had been initiated online. No charges yet, just protection, apparently. I stood in the hallway holding the letter, my coat still on, the smell of cold air clinging to my sleeves. Rebecca was at the dining table with her laptop open, typing fast. When she saw the envelope, her fingers slowed. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Just mail." She nodded too quickly and went back to her screen. That night, After they went to bed, I logged into my bank alerts and scrolled through the notifications. Small charges from the grocery store, the pharmacy, the utility company, everything familiar. Then I checked my email, the old account Harold had helped me set up years ago. Buried in the spam folder was a message from a real estate website, thanking me for my interest in current market valuations. Market valuations. I felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear, because the picture was becoming clear. Relief, because clarity is a kind of mercy. I forwarded the email to myself, printed it in the morning, and slid it into the lockbox with the deed and the bank inquiry. Evidence has a way of calming the nerves. I began to move differently after that. Not louder, quieter. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped filling the silences with apologies. When Rebecca complained about groceries, I handed her the receipt and said nothing. When Daniel asked if I could help cover his car insurance, just this once, I told him I'd need to review my budget first. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You always help," he said. "I always decide," I replied. The words surprised us both. A week later, I scheduled an appointment at the county recorder's office. It was a plain building with fluorescent lights and plastic chairs, the kind of place where people argue quietly over lines on forms. I took a number and waited, listening to a printer churn out official copies for someone else's life. When my turn came, the clerk pulled up my property records. My name? Harold's name, no changes, no liens, no transfers, clean and untouched. "You can sign up for a title alert service," she said, sliding a brochure toward me. "It notifies you if anyone files anything related to your property." "I'll take it," I said immediately. She smiled, approving. "Good idea. We see too many people come in after the fact." After the county office, I went to the post office and rented a small P.O. box. It felt oddly rebellious, redirecting my most important mail somewhere only I controlled. I updated my bank, my insurance, my attorney. Piece by piece, I narrowed the space where Rebecca could reach. At home, tension thickened. Rebecca started dropping comments like breadcrumbs. "It's so expensive living here. Daniel and I are thinking long-term. At our age, stability matters." I didn't pick them up. One evening, she cornered me in the kitchen while Daniel was in the shower. The overhead light hummed softly. "You know," she said, leaning against the counter, "it would make things easier if the house was in Daniel's name eventually. Less paperwork when something happens." Something happens. The phrase hovered between us like a threat dressed as practicality. I turned off the faucet and dried my hands carefully. "My affairs are in order," I said. She tilted her head. "I'm just thinking about family." "So am I," replied. Her eyes hardened. "You don't trust me." I met her gaze. "Trust isn't demanded," I said. "It's earned." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're being dramatic." Maybe I was, or maybe I was finally accurate. That weekend, Daniel suggested a family meeting. We sat at the dining table, the same one Harold refinished himself decades ago. Rebecca brought out her laptop and a legal pad, already prepared. "We just want clarity," Daniel said, rubbing his temples. "About money, about the house, about the future." Rebecca slid a paper toward me. Kungsti, it wasn't a contract, but it wasn't nothing either. Notes about shared expenses, proposed contributions, timelines. My name written at the top like a heading. I didn't touch it. "I've already spoken to a lawyer," I said calmly. The room went still. Rebecca's face drained of color. "A lawyer? Why would you do that?" "For the same reason you looked up market valuations," I replied. Daniel's head snapped up. "What?" Rebecca stood abruptly. "That's not what you think." I stayed seated, then explained the credit inquiry, the security system order, the emails. Daniel looked between us, his expression cracking. "Rebecca?" She crossed her arms. "I was just planning ahead." "For yourself," I said softly. The silence that followed was heavy and final, not explosive, just real. Later that night, Daniel knocked on my bedroom door. He sat on the edge of the bed like a boy again, shoulders slumped. "I didn't know it went that far," he said. "I should have paid attention." "Yes," I replied. "You should have." He nodded, tears gathering. "What happens now?" I looked at the lockbox on my dresser, at the quiet order returning to my thoughts. "Now," I said, "we do things the right way, or we don't do them at all." Downstairs, a door closed harder than necessary. I lay back against my pillows and listened to the house breathe, steady and patient. It had waited for me to remember who it belonged to. The morning after the family meeting, Rebecca didn't come down for breakfast. The house felt hollow without her voice cutting through it, and that absence told me more than any argument could. I made my tea slowly, letting the kettle scream itself empty, and watched steam fog the kitchen window. Outside, a neighbor scraped ice from a windshield. Ordinary life went on. Indifferent to our private reckoning, Daniel sat across from me at the table, hands wrapped around his mug, like he needed the warmth to stay upright. "She's upset," he said, as if I couldn't guess. "I imagine she is," I replied. He stared into his coffee. "She thinks you're trying to push us out." I set my spoon down carefully. "I'm trying to live in my own home without fear." He nodded, but I could see the tug of war inside him, loyalty stretched thin. "Can we figure something out?" he asked. "Like a plan?" I almost smiled at the word. Almost. Instead, I said, "We can talk about arrangements. Clear ones." That afternoon, I met Mr. Henderson again. His office smelled the same, reassuringly unchanged. I told him about the confrontation, about Rebecca's silence, about Daniel's request. He listened without interrupting. "This is where documentation protects relationships," he said when I finished. "If everyone knows the rules, there's less room for manipulation." He drafted a simple occupancy agreement, nothing hostile, nothing dramatic. It outlined expectations, contribution to utilities, respect for privacy, no alterations or installations without my written consent, no financial actions taken in my name. It also included a defined end date, a reasonable one, giving them time to find their own place. When he slid the draft across the desk, my heart thudded. Seeing it in black and white made everything feel official. Grown. A mother shouldn't need paperwork to be respected. But here we were. "Do I have to give this to them?" I asked. "You don't have to do anything," he replied. "But if you want peace, clarity helps. And if they refuse to sign, that tells you something important." I took the document home in a plain envelope. Rebecca emerged that evening like a storm cloud pretending to be calm. "Daniel says you want us to sign something," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "I want us all to know where we stand," I replied. She snatched the envelope and skimmed it, her eyes darting. "An end date?" she scoffed. "So we're temporary guests now?" "You always were," I said gently. Her laugh was sharp. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said. Daniel read it more slowly, his brow furrowed, then smoothed. "This actually makes sense," he murmured. Rebecca rounded on him. "You're taking her side?" "I'm taking reality's side," he said quietly. She pushed the paper back toward me. "I'm not signing this," I nodded. "That's your choice." The next days were tense but controlled. Rebecca stopped speaking to me entirely. She spoke through Daniel, or about me, but never to me. I answered only what was necessary. Silence can be a boundary too. One afternoon, I received an email alert from the title monitoring service. My heart skipped until I opened it. Just a routine notification confirming no changes. I exhaled slowly, grateful for small reassurances. A different alert came later that week, from my bank, a failed login attempt, flagged and blocked. I printed the notification and added it to the lockbox. That evening, I asked Daniel to sit with me. Rebecca was out, clearing her head. "Someone tried to access my account again," I said, placing the paper between us. His face went pale. "I swear, Mom, it wasn't me." "I know," I said, and I did. "But it can't happen again." He rubbed his hands together. "What do you want me to do?" I thought of the boy who once promised to protect me from everything. "I want you to decide who you're building your life with," I said, "and whether there's room for respect." He swallowed hard. "She says you don't trust her." "I don't," I replied simply. When Rebecca came home that night, Daniel told her they needed to talk. I stayed upstairs, the murmur of their voices rising and falling like distant traffic. I didn't listen for words. I listened for tone, for the sound of truth finally being spoken. The next morning, Rebecca announced they would be looking for options. She said it like a favor she was granting me. I thanked her anyway. Weeks passed. Boxes appeared in the hallway. Rebecca packed loudly, making sure everyone knew she was inconvenienced. Daniel moved quietly, folding his life into cardboard with care. On the day they signed the agreement, Daniel only, Rebecca refused to be present. Mr. Henderson notarized it in his office, Daniel's signature steady but sad. "This gives you 3 months," Mr. Henderson explained. "Plenty of time." Daniel nodded. "I understand." When we got home, Rebecca glared at the paper like it had betrayed her. "You're choosing her," she said to Daniel. "I'm choosing myself," he replied. For the first time in a long while, I felt something like pride. That night, after they went to bed, I sat alone in the living room. I ran my hand over the arm of Harold's old chair. I wasn't celebrating, I was steadying myself. Justice, I was learning, doesn't always arrive with a bang. Sometimes it comes as quiet structure, holding chaos at bay. I turned off the lamp and went upstairs, the house settling around me, no longer confused about whose name it answered to. The first night after Daniel signed the agreement, I slept without waking once. That hadn't happened in years. When I opened my eyes in the morning, sunlight lay across the quilt like a blessing that hadn't been rationed. I stayed still for a moment, listening. No arguing, no slammed cabinets, just the monotonous sound of a garbage truck and the steady ticking of the clock Harold fixed the summer before he died. Rebecca changed after that. Not softer, sharper. She moved through the house like a guest counting down a hotel stay, opening cabinets she no longer needed, sighing loudly when she passed me. She stopped cooking entirely. The kitchen, once a battlefield, went quiet. Daniel tried to bridge the gap. He offered to take over more bills, to prove things would be different. I accepted what made sense and declined what didn't. Boundaries only work when they're practiced, not explained. One afternoon, I came home to find Rebecca in the living room with a real estate agent. A stranger stood on my rug, holding a tablet, nodding politely. "I didn't know we had company," I said. Rebecca didn't flinch. "I'm just getting information. For our next place?" The agent looked uncomfortable. "She said she lived here," he offered. "I do," I said calmly. "And I own it." His eyebrows lifted slightly. "Oh, I'm sorry. I should have—" "It's fine," I said, "but I don't allow walkthroughs without notice." Rebecca snapped. "We're leaving anyway." "Then it shouldn't be a problem," I replied. The agent apologized again and left quickly, shoes squeaking against the floor like punctuation on an awkward sentence. Rebecca stared at me with something close to hatred. "You enjoy this," she said. I shook my head. "No, I endure it." That evening, I received a call from my credit card company. Another flagged attempt, another polite voice thanking me for my vigilance. I noted the time, the reference number, and added it to the growing stack in my lockbox. Patterns matter, especially to people who speak the language of rules. Have you ever watched someone you once trusted slowly reveal who they really are? Not in one terrible moment, but in a series of small choices? Did you ever wish you had paid attention sooner, before respect turned into a negotiation? The authority moment came sooner than I expected. A patrol car pulled up in front of the house 2 days later, lights off, but unmistakable. My heart raced until I reminded myself that fear is not always a signal of guilt. A uniformed officer knocked, professional and calm. "Yes," I said. "Ma'am," he said. "We received a call reporting a domestic dispute." Rebecca stood behind him on the porch, arms folded, eyes red in a way that looked practiced. The officer stepped inside, careful. "Is everyone safe?" "Yes," I said, "and I'd like to understand why the call was made." Rebecca spoke quickly. "She's been threatening us, with lawyers, with eviction. It's emotional abuse." The officer turned to me. "May I ask a few questions?" "Of course," I said, "and I have documentation." That changed the air. I retrieved the occupancy agreement, the notarized copy, the bank alerts, the credit inquiry record. I laid them out on the dining table, my hands steady. "This is my home," I said. "They were invited temporarily. These are the terms. These are the attempted financial accesses. No threats, just boundaries." The officer reviewed the papers carefully. He asked Rebecca if she was on the deed. She wasn't. He asked if there had been violence. There hadn't. "This appears to be a civil matter," he said finally. "Not criminal, and the homeowner has the right to set conditions." Rebecca's face fell. "So that's it?" "That's it," he said kindly but firmly. "I'd recommend you both resolve this with your attorney." After he left, the house felt stunned into silence. Rebecca didn't speak to me again that night. She packed more boxes. Daniel sat with me later, eyes rimmed with exhaustion. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have stopped this sooner." "Yes," I replied, "but you're stopping it now." He nodded, tears slipping free. I handed him a tissue without comment. As weeks passed, their world shrank and mine expanded. I reconnected with neighbors. I joined a small book club at the library where I used to work. I laughed more, quietly, honestly. Rebecca moved out first, staying with a friend. Daniel followed a month later, keys returned to the hook by the door. He hugged me longer than usual. "I'll come by for dinner," he said. "If that's okay." "It is," I said, and I meant it. That night, alone again, I walked through each room and turned off the lights one by one. Not because I was afraid of the electric bill, but because I could. Control feels different when it's earned back. I stood in the doorway of my bedroom and looked around at the life I had almost lost by being too kind without being firm. The lockbox sat where it always had, quiet and unassuming. I realized then that revenge doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like peace returning, step by careful step, until your name fits your life again. The house exhaled after they left, like it had been holding its breath along with me. I didn't rush to fill the silence. I let it stretch, let it echo, let it remind me that emptiness is not the same as loneliness. Some spaces are meant to be reclaimed slowly. The first thing I did was change the locks. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. The locksmith was a quiet man, with kind eyes, who didn't ask unnecessary questions. He drilled, fitted, tested, and handed me the new keys with a nod. I placed the old ones in a small envelope and wrote Daniel's name on it. Boundaries don't require drama to be real. I spent the next few days restoring the house in small ways. I put Harold's chair back where it belonged, by the window, where the afternoon light fell. Just right. I returned my paperwork to the office nook, stacking folders neatly, my name written clearly on the tabs. I moved slowly, listening to the sound of my own footsteps, reacquainting myself with each room. Bills arrived at the P.O. box now, safe and predictable. I paid them on a Tuesday morning, tea at my side, sunlight warming my hands. The confirmation screens felt like quiet victories. I printed what mattered and shredded what didn't. Control, I was learning, is a muscle. It strengthens with use. Daniel came by the following Sunday, alone. He brought bread from a bakery we used to visit when he was little, the kind with a crackling crust that leaves flour on your fingers. We ate at the table without hurry. "She's angry," he said finally. "She says you humiliated her." I buttered my bread. I protected myself. He nodded. "I see that now." There was a pause, heavy but honest. "I don't know what happens with us," he added, "but I know I let things go too far." "Yes," I said. "You did." He flinched, then accepted it. Growth often starts with discomfort. That week, I received a letter from the credit card company confirming additional security measures had been permanently applied. Another from the county acknowledging my enrollment in the Title Alert program. Paper after paper, each one a stitch in a torn seam. I framed one document, not the deed, but the mortgage satisfaction notice from years ago. Paid in full. I hung it in the office nook, not for pride, but for remembrance. Harold and I had built something solid. It deserved to be seen. I also did something unexpected. I scheduled an appointment with a counselor at the community center, not because I felt broken, but because I wanted language for what I'd survived. She listened without interruption, her office filled with soft light and neutral colors. "You were exploited because you were generous," she said. "That doesn't make you foolish." Her words settled in me like a truth I'd been resisting. Have you ever confused endurance with love? Did you ever think being needed was the same as being respected? As spring approached, I opened the windows. Fresh air carried in the sounds of children playing and lawn mowers humming. I planted herbs in small pots on the sill, basil, thyme, rosemary, life returning in ordinary ways. One afternoon, I found a folder in a drawer I hadn't opened in years. Inside were letters Harold wrote me when he traveled for work. His handwriting slanted, earnest, and kind. One line caught my eye. "We take care of each other by being honest, even when it's hard." I cried then, not from sadness, but from recognition. Rebecca sent a message eventually. Short, careful. She wanted to pick up a box she'd left behind. I told her a time when I would be home and asked that she come alone. She arrived stiff and formal. We didn't hug. She collected her things quickly. At the door, she hesitated. "I didn't think you'd fight back," she said quietly. I met her eyes. Neither did I. She nodded once and left. That night, I sat on the porch wrapped in a blanket, watching the sky deepen into blue. I felt older than I had in years, and stronger too. There is a strange power that comes when you stop asking to be treated kindly and start insisting on it. I locked the door before bed, turned off the lights, and lay down without fear. The house was mine again, not because I owned it on paper, but because I finally lived in it without apology. Summer arrived quietly, without asking permission. The mornings warmed first, sunlight slipping across the kitchen floor earlier each day, as if the house itself was waking up before I did. I found myself lingering over breakfast, radio murmuring low, the smell of toast settling into the walls like a promise that nothing urgent was waiting to explode. For the first time in a long while, my days belonged to me. I settled into routines that felt earned. On Mondays, I paid bills and balanced accounts, the numbers lining up neatly the way they always had when I was allowed to manage my own life. On Wednesdays, I walked to the library and helped re-shelve books as a volunteer, my fingers remembering the rhythm. People greeted me by name there. Not Daniel's mom. Not the old woman in the big house. Just me. Then, in early June, a thick envelope arrived at my P.O. box. The return address stopped me cold. Rebecca Lawson, attorney at law. I stood there for a long moment, the metal door of the box cool against my knuckles, my breath slow and measured. Of course she had a lawyer. Of course she would try one more time. Some people don't retreat when a door closes. They look for a window. I opened the envelope at the small counter near the mail slots. Inside was a formal letter, heavy with legal language but light on substance. Claims of verbal harassment, allegations of unfair displacement, a request for financial reconciliation related to shared living expenses. No lawsuit. Not yet. Just pressure, posturing, testing. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. My hands didn't shake. That surprised me most of all. At home, I scanned the letter and emailed it to Mr. Henderson. His reply came within the hour. "This is a fishing expedition," he wrote. "They're hoping you'll panic. You won't." We met 2 days later. Mr. Henderson read the letter carefully, adjusting his glasses. "They have no claim to ownership," he said, "and minimal standing regarding expenses, especially since there was no agreement and you covered most costs." "What about tenant rights?" I asked. "You followed the law," he replied. "Notice was given, time was allowed, no illegal eviction, no threats. The police record supports that." Police record. The phrase still felt strange, like it belonged to someone else's story. Yet there it was, a factual note logged by an officer who had seen exactly what this situation was and what it wasn't. He drafted a formal response. Calm, precise, boring, in the best way possible. It outlined dates, payments, the signed occupancy agreement, and the absence of any legal obligation on my part. He attached copies of utility bills, tax receipts, and the agreement itself. Paper against paper. Truth doesn't need to raise its voice. Rebecca's response came a week later. Shorter, sharper, accusatory, but thinner. She wanted mediation. I agreed, not because I feared her, because I wanted closure. The mediation took place in a modest office downtown, beige walls and a long table that had seen many versions of disappointment. A neutral mediator sat at the head, calm and unreadable. Rebecca arrived with her attorney, a young man who kept glancing at his notes like they might rearrange themselves into something stronger. Daniel was not there. That felt right. Rebecca didn't look at me at first. When she did, there was no warmth, but there was something else. Calculation. She opened with emotion, speaking about stress, marriage strain, feeling pushed aside. Her lawyer nodded gravely. When it was my turn, I didn't speak about feelings. I spoke about facts. I talked about the deed dated decades earlier, the mortgage satisfaction, the property tax payments in my name, the utilities I covered, the credit inquiries, the attempted security system installation, the police visit, the signed agreement, the notice period. I placed documents on the table one by one, not dramatically, just carefully. The mediator listened, occasionally asking for clarification. Rebecca interrupted twice, each time gently stopped. "This isn't about who feels wronged," the mediator said at last. "It's about what can be substantiated." Silence settled like dust. Rebecca's lawyer leaned toward her, whispering. She shook her head once, sharply. Then she spoke again, her voice strained. "I just want what's fair." The mediator turned to me. "Mrs. Whitaker?" "What's fair," I said, "is respecting ownership, privacy, and the law. There was nothing more to add. The mediation ended without resolution. That was fine. Not every door closes softly. Some simply lock. 2 weeks later, Mr. Henderson called. "They've decided not to pursue further action," he said. "No lawsuit, no claims." I thanked him and hung up the phone, sitting very still for a long moment afterward. Relief didn't rush in like a wave. It arrived quietly, like a chair offered after a long standing. That evening, Daniel came by unexpectedly. He looked thinner, older. He carried himself like someone who had learned something expensive. "She told me about the mediation," he said. "I assumed she would," I replied. "I'm sorry," he said again, softer this time. "For all of it." I studied my son's face. The familiar lines were still there beneath the strain. Love doesn't vanish because trust fractures. It just changes shape. "I accept your apology," I said. "But things won't go back to how they were." He nodded. "I don't want them to." We sat on the porch as the sun dipped low, the air warm and gentle. He talked about finding his own place, about therapy, about learning to speak sooner instead of later. I listened without fixing, without advising. Some lessons must finish settling on their own. When he left, I went inside and locked the door, not out of fear, but habit, a good one. Later that night, I opened the lockbox and reviewed its contents one last time. Deed, receipts, letters, agreements. I realized I no longer needed to check them so often. Their power came not from vigilance, but from existence. I closed the box and slid it back into the drawer. The house was quiet, peaceful, not empty. I turned off the light and went to bed, knowing that whatever came next would meet a woman who was no longer confused about where she stood, or what she was worth. Autumn came with its own kind of honesty. The air cooled, leaves let go without apology, and the world seemed to agree that holding on forever was never the point. I welcomed it. Summer had helped me recover. Fall helped me understand. My days were fuller than they had been in years, but not crowded. I hosted book club once a month now, setting out simple cookies and pouring tea into mismatched cups. We talked about novels, yes, but also about aging parents, adult children, money fears we were never taught how to name. I learned how common my story was, how many women had mistaken silence for peace. At the library, a young woman asked if I would mentor her. She said I seemed steady. I laughed at that word, then accepted. Steadiness, I was learning, comes from surviving storms without pretending they were breezes. Daniel and I spoke regularly, but carefully. He never asked for money again. He never asked to move back. He asked questions instead. About Harold, about the house, about choices. He was learning to listen. I let him. One afternoon, he brought over a small box. "I found these in storage," he said. Inside were old photographs. Harold holding Daniel on his shoulders. Me laughing, head thrown back, younger than I remembered ever being. We sat on the living room floor, pictures spread out between us like proof that our lives had once been simple. "She didn't like it when I talked about Dad," he said quietly. I nodded. "Some people feel threatened by roots." He looked up at me. "I won't let anyone do that again." "I know," I said. And for the first time I believed it. I began making changes to the house, not because I needed to, but because I wanted to. I painted the guest room a soft green. I replaced the curtains in the living room with ones that let the light in. I framed new photos next to old ones. Life doesn't erase itself. It layers. Financially, I felt lighter too. Not richer, just clearer. I consolidated accounts, updated beneficiaries, finalized my trust. Mr. Henderson complimented my organization. I told him it came from necessity, not talent. Rebecca never contacted me again. Occasionally, I heard things through Daniel. New job, new apartment. new grievances aimed elsewhere. I felt no satisfaction in that, just distance. And distance, I learned, can be merciful. One evening, as I balanced my checkbook at the dining table, I noticed how calm my hands were. No rush, no dread, just figures aligning the way they should. I thought back to the woman who had stood frozen in her kitchen, holding a cracked mug, wondering when she had become invisible. That woman felt far away now, not gone, just older in a different way. I stepped outside onto the porch as dusk settled, the sky streaked with orange and gray. A neighbor waved. Somewhere down the street, someone was cooking dinner. Life continued, unremarkable and precious. I realized then that revenge had never been my goal, even when I thought it was. What I wanted was to be seen, to have my name, my choices, my home acknowledged as mine. The law had helped, paper had helped, but so had courage, quiet and persistent. As night fell, I went inside and locked the door, then unlocked it again to check something, smiling at myself. Old habits take time, but they soften. I turned out the lights room by room, grateful not for what I'd won, but for what I no longer had to fight for. Tomorrow would come, and I would meet it whole. Winter returned gently, not as an ending, but as a settling, the kind that makes you pull a sweater closer and appreciate the weight of it. On my 68th birthday, I woke up before dawn and sat at the kitchen table with a single candle burning, the house quiet and cooperative. I didn't make a wish. I made a promise to never again confuse love with silence. The house was exactly as I left it each night. Safe, respectful, mine. I spent that morning reviewing my will one last time, signing the final page with a pen Harold once used, the ink flowing smooth and certain. My trust was complete, beneficiaries clear, instructions written in plain language, no confusion left behind. I slid the papers into the lockbox, then paused and closed it without locking. Some protections don't need constant guarding once they're properly built. Daniel came for dinner that evening. He brought soup, homemade, slightly oversalted the way he always did. We laughed about it. Real laughter, the kind that doesn't brace for impact. "I've been thinking a lot," he said as we ate, "about how easy it was to let someone else speak for me, to decide things I should have decided." I looked at my son, older now, humbler. "Awareness is a beginning," I said. "Action is what matters." He nodded. "I'm learning." After he left, I washed the dishes slowly, watching snow begin to fall outside the window. Each flake landed without force, changing the world by accumulation. That's how my life had shifted too, not through one dramatic moment, but through steady, deliberate choices. I thought about Rebecca, briefly, not with anger, not even with relief, just acknowledgement. She had been a chapter, not the book, a test, not the meaning. Have you ever reached a point where you realized survival wasn't enough anymore? Where you understood that peace requires participation, not patience? Later, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, I opened a photo album and stopped on one picture of myself I barely recognized. A younger woman standing in front of this same house, keys in her hand, eyes bright with possibility. I touched the page and smiled softly. "I kept it," I whispered. "I kept us." That night, as I turned off the lights for the last time, I didn't check the doors twice. I didn't listen for footsteps. I didn't rehearse explanations in my head. I went to bed carrying only myself. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Kindness without boundaries invites erasure, but kindness with clarity builds a life no one can steal. Thank you for sitting with me through this story, for listening to an old woman remember herself out loud. If this story moved you, take a quiet second to show it. Like, subscribe, or share it with someone who might need the reminder. And tell me honestly, if you were in my place, what would you have done?